now what I would like to do is open this up to really just a more freewheeling discussion. We've got a little bit of time left, and I know we didn't get to all of the questions. We've got all of our speakers still here, so feel free to unmute yourself and make a comment, ask a question. I would like to ask Steve Wagner. I know you're here. You've been working on a carport, I believe, over a police station in South Windsor. You've seen a little bit of discussion here about police stations. Anything you'd like to add to this discussion?
So yes, we have a ZREC bid in right now for a carport behind our police station. Turns out that we are also not just repaving, but basically rebuilding the parking lot behind the police station. So we're getting some cost benefit out of the fact that the solar installer will not have to repave the parking lot after they make trenches out to the solar arrays. It's marginally a savings. I think we're doing it to protect the police cars and the employees parking to give them some, better coverage. But I think this issue that Cheshire has with the icing underneath the panels has gotten some very recent discussion going, and so we've been back with our installer talking about options for that. They're not too confident that the gaskets will last long enough. They don't really know. There is the issue of putting the decking under there, so we kind of have a discussion. I was very glad to hear that discussion today about those two options. I did ask the question about the cable that carries the current from the solar panels into the building, and in our case, we're not trying to sell the EV. So if we put EV police cars underneath, my understanding was that it's technically possible that single supply line can run in both directions. If the solar panel is making more electricity than we're using, if it's making more electricity than the EVs are using, then the power will be running back into the building. In the middle of the night, the power would be running out of the building and into the cars to charge them, into the cruisers. So I was a little surprised at the answer we got on that, and I'm going to go back and I don't know, maybe there's an opinion available here on that one. But we were sort of planning to kind of get double duty out of that feed line that goes to the town's panel.
This is Stefan from Earthlight. There are some inverters, I know on the residential side, that do what you're describing, where the solar power comes into that and there'll be an EV charger built right into it. I'm unaware of inverters on the commercial side that do that. Generally, a commercial inverter is going to be at a different voltage than what most level 2 chargers are operating at. So you would need that energy to go from the inverter back to the building, back to your service, then back out through any step-down transformers that actually feed the loads of the building. It's generally unwise too to add loads to the solar array directly, because you can have voltage fluctuation issues and the system could shut down. So you want your building to modulate the energy quality going to all of your loads, and that includes EVs. So the solar powers the building would power the EV chargers. That's generally the way it's designed. And now there's other ways to do it. Engineers can do a lot of creative things. So I don't want to say that that's the only way to do it, but that's conventionally what we've seen.
I appreciate.
And you don't want to forget about the fact that there's the incentive program. So the ZREC program now, and whatever programs follow along on your building, there's going to be a ZREC meter, and that's measuring all of the power the solar's putting out. And if you've taken some of that power, I don't know if it'd be allowed at all, but you'd at least have a reduced benefit. So you want to be benefited for all the power it produces.
So we sort of want to make sure that the EV chargers are on the building side of that meter.
Right.
Yes.
Mark,
The EV chargers just act like a load, like any other load in the building. It actually kind of keeps it pretty simple for any future electricians trying to diagnose, future work that the building might need as well.
Okay, thank you.
Jim, did you want to add something there?
well, I had a question on a different topic than EV chargers.
All right, well, go ahead. I think we've addressed the EV chargers.
Yeah, so a topic is something that I mentioned but couldn't really add to it, and I don't know if you, Mark, can speak to it or anybody else can. But the ZREC program for medium and large, basically you have to submit your request by June 14th. And my understanding is the law is basically set to expire. So it's been out there for 10 years and this is the end game. Do we have any sense of next steps? Is there a new law in place? Is the legislature discussing anything? I think they're still in session until next week. Is there any sense on what would happen after June 14th with anything over 100 kW in terms of state incentives?
My understanding is fairly limited. There is a PURA docket that is looking at the future incentives for solar. I don't know if anyone here or anybody from Earthlight or anyone else is closer to that issue of what's coming. But as you say, the ZRECs are running out.
I mean, I guess I can take the first stab at that question, and then, of course, if others want to chime in as well. So yes, the large and medium ZRECs are coming to an end. This is the last solicitation for that. You'll have access to the small ZRECs probably through October or November. In terms of what the legislation says, the laws have been passed. We are advocating to try to get a couple of other changes to those laws in this current session, but the general program is pretty set in terms of legislative requirements. PURA, the Public Utility Regulatory Authority, is currently doing a lot of investigating and program writing on this replacement program. And I can speak to it today if folks are interested as to the concept of what the replacement program is going to be, but we don't have the specifics yet. The core difference, though, I guess I'll point out, is that instead of having net metering as we know it today, and then a ZREC and then all of that kind of gets directly paid out based on solar production to whoever owns the equipment or has the account for the electric service, it's going to be consolidated generally. So now you're going to have a production tariff that has one value, and then whatever you use would be at the retail rate. So it's going to get a little bit confusing because if you use all of your energy in real time, you're offsetting your retail rate. If you're exporting something to the grid, you're going to get some export, value for that. And that's going to include basically a REC equivalent. It's going to get a little more convoluted on that side. Where it gets a little simpler, though, is we're going to have an opportunity to put solar arrays in front of the meter, meaning it's not going to be tied in with the building, like we were just talking about. It can actually go in front of the utility meter. And this is actually interesting for municipalities because municipalities might have multiple meters on a campus or a site. You can now aggregate all of the loads of those meters. So if you have a school or a police station over here, a fire department over there, community center over here, and it's all on a town campus, you can aggregate all of those meters, put one solar canopy or solar array, on that site, put it in front of one of those meters, and sell the energy directly to the utility for that tariff price. And that'll be kind of a REC component and the energy value, all just baked into one payment. And it actually simplifies arrays a little bit. We do expect that the long-term value of that incentive will be less generous than what we have today with net metering and the ZRECs. However, it will add a lot of flexibility for in terms of the project itself, so we can get the costs down because we don't have to carve it up into a bunch of pieces and go behind a bunch of different meters. So I hope that wasn't too vague. Hopefully that was helpful. We expect to have more of those programs. We expect to have more of that information come November. I think that's when PURA has set their own deadlines internally because they have to launch this program to replace the ZREC in 2022. And we developers, we're starving for this information. And we've been told that we'll have probably about a month and a half to adapt before it goes live.
Okay, I have a question.
Oh.
Have any of the solar canopies that have been developed in Connecticut also been part of shared solar, where residents themselves directly benefit from the solar energy?
I am not aware of any carports or canopies that have been used for shared solar. I know there are larger solar projects that are this shared clean energy facility. Is anyone else aware of a canopy that's been used? It certainly it strikes us as a great use of if there's a space that maybe doesn't have a large parking lot, that maybe doesn't have a large electric load right nearby, but is in an area that could benefit its residents. But I'm not aware of any that have been done.
No.
I'm not aware of any either, and it's usually cost prohibitive because you're adding that extra dollar or a little bit more than $1 a watt from what they would be paying to put it on the ground. So the person owning that solar array, they're going to get a lot less return for their money. So that's why you don't usually see it.
Yeah, and the program for the shared solar is pretty small. So you get a few of those low-cost ground-mounted solar arrays somewhere, out in rural Connecticut, and the program is fully subscribed. So the carports that might need a little bit more of an incentive to work out lose those bids. But it's possible. But I'm unaware of any live solar canopies in Connecticut that are in the shared solar program.
So I mentioned this coalition that we want to form, and we want to spend more time. Kieran outlined some of what some of our neighboring states do already in terms of incentives. A question for anyone, but particularly for Earthlight, do you work in other states, and have you seen incentives that you think really make the difference or tip the scales?
Obviously, Kieran talked about Massachusetts. Go ahead. You're good.
Yeah, I mean, those programs are better. They take into account the added cost as well as the benefits of those carports. Here in Connecticut, we have to, the solar canopies have to go toe to toe with the least expensive rooftop solar arrays out there, which is great. We want solar on roofs for sure, but the program is small. So if the folks on this call want to ask their legislators for anything, we need a bigger program, because what ends up happening is you could have 100 projects come to the table and only the least expensive 10 are going to get built. So the more expensive roofer mounts, the ground mounts, the solar carports, they're gonna have to be that much more ideal, almost. I don't want to get grandiose and call it a unicorn project. I mean, they can certainly get built. We've built several of them. But it's harder for the stars to align on those projects because there's less room for error or added costs to be tolerated in the project economics. So Connecticut just needs to support more solar. I think we're drastically behind our neighboring states, and it's a bit discouraging how much the legislature just doesn't seem to acknowledge that.
Mark, we'd be happy to support your coalition.
Great. It is starting to take shape of what we need to ask for. One of the great advantages of, which we've talked about, of these canopies is that everyone that gets built on quote unquote degraded real estate means that less we need to put on farmland and in forest. So part of this coalition, I think, also needs to include some of the agricultural and the forest protectors. And it seems like at least an argument, or maybe even a mechanism for for incentivizing these things, is that value of preserving land. And we talk about ZREC as a value to society that you're being rewarded for producing clean energy. There should be a value of protecting our land that also gets filtered in, gets factored in here.
That's a great point.
what I'm going to suggest is we're not going to have a hard stop. We're not going to shut down the Zoom session at 11:30. But what I would like to do is sort of officially, wrap up. I know some people have to move on at 11:30, but I just want to again thank our. Oh, that just went away. There it is. Thank our co-host. This is really a joint operation, and particularly I want to thank the Connecticut Energy Network, and that is Patrice, and it's a group of clean energy advocates across the state, and this is the group that comes to these meetings and then goes home and does stuff, which is just great. And we want to thank Sierra Club for their support, and we look forward to working with Sierra Club Connecticut too. In this coalition. So again, this will all be recorded. We'll be sending out links. It has been recorded. We will send out links to everything you've seen today: the slides, the chat, the videos you'll find on the website, these different reports, and all. So all that will be coming your way. So again, we're not going to shut down the session, but I do want to just sort of acknowledge this has just been a fantastic discussion, I think full of both some new research, but also some real practical insights. And it's clear that we have a potentially great resource in front of us, but we're going to have to really work to actually realize it. So thanks to Kieran, thanks to Tim, Stefan, and Eric. Thanks to Patrice for all of the work that goes into making this happen. Thanks to the Connecticut Energy Network, to Sierra Club. Feel free to move on if you have to, but again, I know this Connecticut Energy Network group is a very tight-knit group, loves to be together. I hope we can be together physically soon, but feel free to stay on and ask more questions, share your insights, or just chat. So thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. These presentations have been very informative. Stefan, hi. Haven't seen you in a long time. It's Diane Lintakis.
Hi, Diane. Hi.
I have a question for you about Windsor. Where in Windsor exactly are the solar canopies or the solar carport?
70 Lamberton Road.
Thank you.
I have a question, I think for Earthlight, you might be able to answer it for everybody really. The financing structures. I mean, most typically for a town project, you don't get the tax equity, you're tax free. So what's a common financing structure for any solar project that ends up being a town-owned asset? You had mentioned that, Stefan, I think.
Yeah, it's going to be similar to the regular solar options. It's important to look at all of the different scenarios, right? Because a PPA, for example, might mitigate risk and put a lot of responsibility on a third party. But believe it or not, the bottom line could sometimes actually be better for a town to own it directly. Towns have access to extremely low cost of capital.
Okay.
And if that becomes a town-owned asset, the maintenance is quite low. So believe it or not, ownership could result in a stronger bottom line with a little bit of added risk for that maintenance. So understanding the product and what you're getting could be good. But always look at a PPA. You always want to look at the ownership option. And then there's also operating leases. Some operating lease providers will allow municipalities to participate. And this is basically a path to ownership where a third party takes advantage of the tax credits for over the first 6 to 7 years. And then there's a fair market value buyout to whoever the owner is. And then that amount could also be financed in a conventional loan, keeping you relatively cash neutral during that period of time. But then you're enjoying the full benefit of the system now that the tax credits have been realized, and it's yours from then on. So those are the few probably most popular ways to do it.
Okay, thank you.
Actually, I'll point out one more. I'll point out one more plug. There's a company. I don't want to advertise for anybody in particular right now, but and I don't know how unique this model is, but some of them will actually take an upfront payment. So if the system, let's just say in round numbers, is $500,000, you can get a 12% discount on it I got to do some math here to make sure I get it right. So it's a $60,000 discount by prepaying that operating lease to companies like them. So if the town wanted to make a capital expenditure, instead of spending the full 500,000, you could spend 440, and it's owned by that third party for 5 or 6 years, and then that 440 included the buyout. So you're done. So you basically are just getting a big discount on the equipment on day one, because this other entity was allowed to be involved to take advantage of those tax credits on your behalf. So there's a few creative ways to do it, and you want to look at all those different ways, so that way the town can decide really what's best for them, before building the project.
And Stefan, a corollary to your remarks is that when a municipality is looking at a PPA, really that buyout provision is something that maybe doesn't get all the top billing people probably focus on the rate, but you really ought to look at that buyout provision and think ahead. Yeah,
and a lot of modern PPAs don't have buyout options until year 20. The plan is to go the full 20 years. As a matter of fact, if you have too much verbiage in a PPA talking about buyouts, it could raise the eyebrow of the IRS, because it's not supposed to be a purchase agreement. It's supposed to be a service contract for 20 years. And at the end of 20 years, those PPAs are actually more forgiving in terms of removing the system. But if you have the long-term, intentions of owning that system, then you want to know what that implication is going to be, because otherwise, if the cost is too high, you might end up with nothing at all and have to resubscribe or do the whole project over again.
If I could make one point on top of that, we hear very often when PPA providers are owning a system that the town shouldn't care what kind of panels are on there, because they're not owning the panels anyway. And I couldn't disagree more if the end result is that the town's planning on obtaining the ownership at that 20-year mark. You don't want a panel with a 10-year warranty that now you're taking ownership of. You want it to have a 25-year warranty and be lasting for 40 years. So I completely disagree whenever I hear that, which is very common.
So I'm just going to add one point as the municipal official here. I am a big believer in getting public support for things. One of the differences, so I appreciate what you said, Stefan. But at least in the town of Cheshire, and every town is different, but in the town of Cheshire, if we were going to do a capital project, there's going to be different rules. You might even have to go to referendum depending on the cost. But when you do the PPA, at least for us, we're just switching out our rates. We pay Eversource every year for all our bills. So it really doesn't, you don't need to go to the voters. If I thought the voters didn't support it, I would have a problem with it. Generally, I think most voters are going to be comfortable with these projects. But it's one step in the process that could be a real hang up if you had to go to referendum or do something along those lines.
One question.
Yeah, we totally understand. There's a political aspect here. There's a lot of cooks in the kitchen, and it needs to be easily communicated and understood to a lot of people. Yeah, absolutely.
Kind of a question I have that goes to this idea of a town campaign. From an Earthlight perspective, are there economies of scale as we think? So let's say I'm in West Hartford and we have 50 parking lots. Is there something that we can do in our campaign that would allow us to sort of evaluate at a high level and take away some of that risk that the developer would have to incur? In other words, can you come in with a ground imaging radar system and do 10 spots at once and sort of get an economy of scale that way? I guess broadly asked, the question is, if we do multiple sites in a town, is there opportunity to get a lower per unit cost?
Yeah, absolutely, because the relationship and the investigation on the bills, it might not work out for every site, but it will work out for some, right? And so if there's 50 parking lots, to look at, there's a great opportunity that you're going to find a few that are not just viable, but probably quite advantageous for the town. A lot of times those parking lots are next to a building that also has a large roof. So you could combine a canopy with a rooftop array and leverage the financial benefits of an inexpensive rooftop array into getting that canopy by pairing the two together. So you're going to have all kinds of opportunities to explore abstract ideas and then drill down as well into some of the more, the deeper level variables, like what's going on underground and the complex levels. And I'd be glad, to talk to you offline. I mean, Eric could even can take a high level view with that and help you, pick a plan going forward. But I think that's a great approach, especially from a developer standpoint, because if it's just one site and one thing goes wrong, the whole thing could be off. But if there's 50 sites, and there's an opportunity for a business to do what they do somewhere in there.
Diane, I see you have your hand up. Did you have a comment?
Yes. Yes. Hi. Good morning, and thank you. This was a terrific, with some real world experiences, which is what we need to convey to our local officials. And my two comments. Number one is very smart for PACE to put together this coalition, because definitely I am very tired of our legislature getting in the way of progress. And I think there are some real world examples in the Yukon studies that may help them bring them over the mark. But part of that coalition, and I would like to be part of it, is what I'm finding with the DAS, or the Department of Administrative Services, related to school reimbursements. They have not really, I don't think they necessarily understand how this could be really a help to the bottom line in towns. So I wondered if Earthlight has had any experience yet with projects where they're helping a town go for reimbursements. It's such an onerous process anyway, but I think, I know in my town, Norwalk, it really hung up a wonderful project, and there are many parking lots that I would like to speak with you and Kieran about, because it's just ripe for opportunity. Thank you.
I'm not even really familiar with who DAS is. I certainly haven't helped anybody get through that.
That's the
Yeah,
Department of Administrative Services. Most people think that the reimbursements are done by the Board of Ed, the State Board of Ed, but I learned that it's the Department of Administrative Services that looks over in this really onerous process of timing, and it's just mind-blowing, and it's not a user-friendly process for most town building departments and school people. So that needs, that needs help too, but I didn't know if you had any projects yet where you helped a town get a good deal on a school carport canopy.
I've run across this before with some municipalities. I don't claim to be an expert at that process and how that goes, and how these towns can submit for reimbursement for their capital investments from the DAS. But it's certainly something we would be able to provide kind of, backing information for if that municipality wanted to go that route to secure funding. Towns have access to capital in a lot of different creative ways and organizations, whether it be federal funds and the state funds and various, pocketbooks. So we're happy to help whoever is investigating those grants or funding sources, and help them check the boxes on the application and say, well, if this is the information they're asking for, then a developer is going to need to flesh out that application. So we're happy to do that, because the incentives are lacking in Connecticut. So if municipalities or local communities are able to wrangle up some dollars, and there's an effort on the ground, on the grassroots level, we want to provide you with that support to go and get it, so that we can develop more of these across Connecticut.
Stephen Wagner, did you have something to add to this?
Now that I'm unmuted, a couple of things. First of all, South Windsor is 8 years into a 10-year program to replace all our elementary schools with brand new schools, tearing down the old schools and building new ones. Inherent in the design of all these schools is they are solar ready, in the sense that we won't be, we'll have the conduits inside the building. The last project is about to come in front of, I'm actually a zoning commissioner as well. It's about to come into zoning, and they will have provision for electric vehicle charging in the parking lot. I don't believe they're going to be going for canopies, but because of the way the tax incentives work, and there's been some discussion of that here already, we basically are not including the solar in the actual building of the school, but coming along very quickly afterward. And all these schools are getting rooftop solar. The newest school will be getting EV chargers in the parking lot. Again, taking advantage of the tax requires a little bit of creativity. So you basically build the school, come along and install the solar with the PPAs. That's what we've done. I like those other financing options. We'll have to look into that, but that's what we're doing. And the carport would basically work the same way, I think. If you wanted to do a carport, I would recommend getting the what do you call the foundations in as part of the original school project, but maybe not the superstructure and the panels, and then let your have a contract in place with the provider to do the PPA or whatever after the school is built. So keep that's one way of getting the tax incentive benefit in there and it doesn't raise the cost of the school that much. To have a few extra conduits running around under the roof or out into the parking lot. That can be built into the money you get authorized to spend. You're limited on what you can spend on the school as part of the project. I mean, you go to the state and say, we want to spend $30 million to rebuild the school. You can't spend 31 million. So if adding a bunch of solar panels on the roof that you own would run you over that, it makes it undesirable. Plus, you lose the tax benefit. So we've already got 2 of our new schools with solar panels on them. One of them is sitting there waiting for the recs, and the other one hasn't come before planning and zoning yet. So we're a little earlier in that discussion.
Gene, you had your hand up. Did you want to comment on the schools issue as well?
I just wondered about economy, the scale of the project. Is there a minimum size that we should, of canopy that we should consider in order to make it economically worthwhile?
I don't know if there's a hard and fast minimum, and Eric might be able to speak to this a little bit, but I would think that you'd want to get to at least 150 kW, maybe 200 kW on the system size before things start to, that's when things start to work out for on the bottom line in terms of savings. You can go smaller than that, and you can get all the functionality of a carport and some of the savings, right? From solar a solar canopy doesn't necessarily pay for its entire self, but it could reduce the cost of ownership because of the solar benefits. But then you're getting the covered parking, you're getting the renewable aspect. So it really comes down to what the end goal of the community is. If cash savings is an imperative and it has to be cash positive, then you're going to need a slightly bigger system, maybe 150 to 200 kW.
Well, can you translate that capacity in terms of car spots?
Sure, I'll get my calculator out here. I'll try to figure that out for you real quick.
Karen might know on that one. 150 to 200 kW, is that what you said?
Yeah, I'm coming up with about 7,500 square feet. So if a car takes up, 32. So that's enough parking for about maybe 200 to 220 cars. Eric, does that sound right to you? I mean, that's really quick math. I hope I didn't get a decimal point wrong.
That's I didn't do any math. It just sounds like a a lot more parking spaces than I would have expected the number to be.
It does. The 200 sounds a bit large. But really, it's about 300 to 320 solar panels.
You mentioned that you have looked at parking areas in New Haven, and I'm thinking in terms of environmental justice in a city like New Haven, where we have a lot of low-income renters. And you mentioned that they're not, the carports are not always feasible for cost-effective for doing a shared solar. What can a city like New Haven do to use? We have very large parking areas. What can a city like New Haven do to bring that kind of solar option to local communities? Is it possible to combine with a large user, like say if Yale Hospital wanted to be involved, can that be combined with this shared solar, or is there a mechanism for environmental justice issues?
Well, anytime a municipal, I'm sorry, go ahead. What I was going to say to
you go ahead.
Kieran, go ahead. You probably more appropriate for this. I was just going to make a simple point. Anytime a municipality saves $1, that's $1 that they can put to another program. But I'm unaware of a mechanism that's already in place to do specifically what you're asking. But Kieran, I know has done a lot of research on policy and the municipal level, so I'll let Kieran take it from here.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I guess the first point I would say is, you know, obviously cities have very limited resources financially, so the state policy is really important to help make those gaps. But I think your point about an entity like Yale New Haven Hospital is exactly what I would think. So these are, you know, getting organizations that, and like Yale is an example of an organization that's trying to do more of these projects, I feel like, just in terms of investing in some of these low-income, underserved areas. So I would say that there just is potential to do that in the sense of these, like a hospital is a great example, generally in a more dense population center in New Haven. They have a large parking lot. So I think it's just a matter of the business itself working with the city to allocate only some of the energy to use in the hospital, for example, and then establishing the ownership pathways. But I think, yeah, it's more on the property owner necessarily than the city.
I will add that the Green Bank, the Connecticut Green Bank, does a lot to make sure that all ratepayers of all type have access to programs, because whether you're low income or high income, if you have an electric bill, you're paying into these programs that need to service as many ratepayers as possible. So the Connecticut Green Bank, one of their primary goals in their existence is to make sure that all ratepayers can extract some benefit from those programs. And unfortunately, there are some segments of the ratepayer group that are left out. And whenever the Green Bank is made aware of these types of things, there's generally an opportunity for them to take on a project to address that. So it could be a good organization to reach out to.
I'd like to just add on to what he was saying earlier, or correct a little bit with the amount of spaces it would take. I just pulled up an existing project that we're working on and counted the spaces, looked at the size. So you're looking at about 50 parking spaces underneath 150 kW project. And then one other thing to note, it probably would have been useful to have in the presentation, but there's two different kinds of carports, or two basic standard carports, right? You've got a T-shaped carport and you've got an L-shaped carport. Your T-shaped carport is by far more cost effective because the foundations are a huge cost in the project, and you're covering twice as many spaces and you're getting twice as much solar for the same foundation cost. So if you're looking at parking lots and you're looking at a bunch of L shapes around the perimeter versus putting T's in the middle, you're far better off with the T's.
I have a question, and that is, this is Mike Cohen. You've been talking about municipal projects for this whole presentation. Is there any reason why commercial projects, malls are less attractive for canopy parking because there's plenty of them around.
Some of the
I think
examples,
canopy park.
some of the examples that we showed were for businesses. So we definitely do it for businesses. This is just what we were asked to be talking about. So we're focusing on that, but yeah, it definitely works. Go ahead, Stefan.
Yeah, I would say it's more advantageous by default for businesses because they can directly take advantage of those tax credits. And there's actually probably more financing solutions available. Like, for example, CPACE is, if that business is in a CPACE town, which most towns I think are signed into that program now, they could take advantage of that very long-term, low-interest financing. But all of the incentive structures are basically the same, whether it's CNI or municipal. Municipalities, I think, have the unique advantage of having multiple sites to be looked at. As that other gentleman was referencing, there might be 50 sites. So it's a great opportunity for PACE members to go out into their community and get those town leaders involved, because instead of a business owner just saying whether or not their business checks out or not, you can go to the town and you can look at dozens of buildings theoretically to look for opportunities to further this green initiative.
Well, this has been a fantastic discussion. It's clear we have our work cut out for us to make these, to get these things built, but I think we've moved a big step forward today in understanding what that's going to take. So again, thank you to our hosts, to our sponsors, to our speakers, and to all of you for sticking around and adding your 2 cents worth. So look for more opportunities to stay involved on this and take advantage of this wonderful resource. So have a great weekend, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. You too.